Al, it's time to take a journey back into the past.
Yes.
The 19th century. Japan.
Japan. Sure is a time.
Sure is a time period, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're going to talk about some history today. Welcome to History Podcast.
I mean, I do have a PhD in history, but not in Japanese history.
It's a little bit different.
A little bit different. But I
Yes,
do
hello.
like history.
Welcome to this week's episode of Season Let Checkup OVA. It's a podcast where we have conversations about video games, anime, and manga. Hello, I'm Jared, joined as always by Doc Al and Ladium.
Hello, hello.
This is episode 323. And hey, they put out a new Yakuza game
They did.
based off of a game that came out 9 years ago. Like a Dragon Ishin is out, which is still very surprising to think about.
Yeah, I mean, the announcement of it was amazing. Like, it just came out of nowhere, and I knew of this game, because of, us diving into the Yakuza series. And by us diving, I mean, you were already a big fan, and you're like, hey, Al, what about you play some of these fun games? Poke, 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 poke. And then I fell into the deep end. But I'd seen things on the internet about this game, but I didn't know a whole lot about it.
Yeah, this is one of those games that a lot of people looked at and were like, yeah, there's really no chance this gets localized because of how rooted in Japanese history it is and how much you would have to explain to people outside of Japan who maybe don't follow Japanese history to a academic degree, let's say.
Right.
So it'd be very hard to, get all the story stuff out there, which I think in this remake they did, or remaster, or whatever you want to call it, they do a good job of trying to give you ways to contextualize everything. Yeah, there's if there's specific terms or names or whatever that come up, there's a button you can press and be like, all right, here's exactly what this means, or here's where this area is now in current day Japan. Let's contextualize all of this for you. Let's make this make a little bit more sense because we realize this is going to be very confusing if you don't understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
and we were talking. Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
I was gonna say we were talking about it before we hit record, but this is probably some well-known Japanese history in Japan. So it was very kind of them to try and figure out a way to make it doable for localized audiences.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Anyway, continue.
So yeah, this originally was a PlayStation 4 launch game.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It came out on February 22nd, 2014 in Japan on the PS4 and PS3. And then there was no chance this was ever going to come out before, I think, now, because this game comes out after Yakuza 5 comes out, and at that time period, the Yakuza games, especially outside of Japan, were not as big of a hit as they are now. That wouldn't happen until Yakuza 0 comes out. Mm-hmm. So obviously this game was never really going to be on the table during this time period of getting released over here in the slightest.
Right.
I think now is a good time to do a remake of this because, like we said, the series is much more popular nowadays. It gives you something to play in between, the wait between, after Lost Judgment and, the next two games that are coming out, which are going to be a little bit of a ways away. Mm-hmm. So it's a nice little stopgap that you can play. And also it's a game that, like we said, a lot of people thought would never, ever be released outside of Japan just due to its nature and the way the story is and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So it's a cool little thing that, it's a cool bit of history to get this game actually coming out 9 years after the fact, essentially.
Mm-hmm. It's all polished up with some new character models.
Yeah, they redid, I think they redid some graphic stuff or some stuff. They put this on Unreal Engine, which is obviously a different engine than what they used originally, which would have been the Yakuza 5 engine. Mm-hmm. It does play like one of those older games. So I know there's a lot of people who are going to come to this and be more familiar to the Dragon Engine style games and be like, what the heck is this? This feels very old. And because it's an old game, it's a 9-year-old game. So it's going to feel old. I think it helps for me because we had gone through all of the Yakuza games 2 years ago, And I had played through 3, 4, and 5. I had, got familiar with those style of games. So, like, coming back to this, it really wasn't that big of, like, a culture shock or anything. It was just like, okay, I just got to get reused to these systems and everything, how this game works, how the fighting works, how the inventory management works, which I think they do some really good things with the inventory management in this game compared to some of those past Yakuza games that they had put out. So, there was things in here that I was like, oh, wow, this is actually really well done and stuff like, you don't have fishing in your inventory. It's a
Right.
separate thing. Like, the produce is a separate thing. Materials are a separate thing. I was like, this is brilliant. This
Yep.
is really smart.
Very, very good.
Yeah, so, like, there's
The only thing
a
that's
lot of
not a
good things
separate
in
thing
here.
is the items you get from the spinny wheel, so you end up with a lot of rice and paper.
Just don't get a lot of free or prize tickets. That's the thing.
Says the person who's running around with over 200 prize tickets.
Shh, don't worry about it.
What you said last time.
Yeah.
Guess what I did?
But yeah, the remake came out this year, February 21st, 2023, excuse me, on the PS5, PS4, PC, the Xbox One, and Xbox Series X and S. They put out more trooper cards for this game, including some, like, influencers or fans of the Yakuza series, like one Kenny Omega, the wrestler,
One-winged angel.
the one-winged angel himself. Which is very weird and wild to think about.
Yeah.
Let's see what this wiki says about what they did, really. Okay, so trooper cards apparently could not be used in regular combat before, but now they can.
Oh, interesting.
Which I think is a good idea.
Yeah.
Certain enemy encounters were also adjusted by giving boss enemies special abilities. In addition, several characters of the game were also recast with new actors who have previously portrayed other characters in the mainline titles, notably from 0, 6, and Like a Dragon, which is 7.
Mm-hmm.
With the audio only being available in Japanese, which I don't see dubbing this would have been very weird.
It would have been a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that, I'm usually a big fan of having dubs. And like the Judgment, Lost Judgment, and 7 dubs are really, really good.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But I think given like the context of the game and the setting of the game, having it be in Japanese is it fits, it's smart.
Yeah.
Also it's probably one of the reasons why we were actually able to get it, because they didn't have to dub it.
Cheaper that way.
It's cheaper.
The singing bar features songs that are from the original game as well as new songs, including an arrangement of the series' fan favorite karaoke track, Baka Mitai.
Yeah, you want to sing the song about the fighting Sakura?
30 times?
30 times?
You can definitely do that.
And then there's the one like booby song that we did once that I was like, oh, those sure are some boobies.
The Himmer Hammers are coming loose.
They are out there and very distracting.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
There's a little bit about development and release for the original title here on the wiki. They put out a demo on the PlayStation Store on February 13th, 2014. There was also a free app on the PlayStation Vita that was available. I don't know what that app entailed or anything, but it apparently was a thing.
Okay.
On February 22nd, 2014, a DLC named Digest Narration Voice was made available. Which, again, I don't know what that entails.
Mm-mm.
And then the game sold 138,158 copies on PS3 and 82,540 copies on PS4 for a total of 220,698 copies on its first 2 days of sale. By March 31st, 2014, the game had sold 390,000 copies, and the original version was awarded a near-perfect scores of 38 of 40 and 39 of 40 on the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4, respectively, by Famitsu.
Wow. That's impressive.
Counteractive to that, here is the Metacritic scores for the remake. They got an 80 of 100 on PC, PS5 got an 81 out of 100, and the Xbox Series X and S version got a 78 out of 100. This says that some of the outlets, such as Eurogamer, liked the game's side stories, but felt it retained much of its early 8th gen DNA. Despite being rebuilt from the ground up in Unreal Engine 4, it feels as though the team has stuck with the same building plans as the original, where loading screens separate interiors and neighboring locations, while NPCs retain the awkward late PS3 marionette-looking look and movements. Yes, because it's that kind of game.
Yep, yep.
You're not going to be able to fix all of that without literally rebuilding the entire game.
No.
So.
And also, like, the NPCs do stuff that are hilarious. So,
Yeah, it's fun.
like, just
There's
accept
a
the weird.
charm to it.
It's a charm. That's a charm. And like, are we really that weak that we can't deal with loading screens anymore?
I mean, to be fair, on the PS5 version, it does feel very strange that the loading times are kind of long,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's like, who cares?
I mean, I didn't even really notice it,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, I guess I've been dealing with games with loading screens forever. So I was just like, okay, da 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 da.
Yeah.
Um, man, it's an interesting complaint though with the NPCs.
Just go replay Yakuza 5 and 4 and 3 and see how how they act, and then you'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, it's just one of those games.
Yep, just one of those games.
That's how you got to do it. Let's talk a little bit about the gameplay of this before we dive into like spoilery parts of this game.
Okay.
There are multiple fighting styles in this. It is similar to Zero in that respect. I would say like also the skill trees are very Zero-esque as
Yeah.
well. I mean, this is
Yeah.
obviously a predecessor to Zero, so they would have been able to take ideas from this and implement them into Zero if they would have wanted to and everything. But in this you get the regular brawler style that the series is known for, especially for Kiryu and all that sort of stuff. You have a swordsman style where you fight with a sword. You have a gunman style where you use a pistol, and then there's the wild dancer where you use a sword and gun. I thought they were the three new ones were very interesting, and I thought they played really well. It was weird that like the hand-to-hand combat style was like the weakest out of all of them, considering that's usually what you come to these series for, is that hand-to-hand combat with just your fists and everything. So I thought that was weird that like that one's kind of the weakest of all of them.
Yeah.
But I think as well they kind of just want you to use these other styles because it's more in line with the times.
Right, right. It makes more sense for a samurai to use a samurai sword.
Right.
Although, like, let's just chalk it up to the lack of bikes existing at that point.
It's true.
Because, if Ryoma Sakamoto had had a bike, he would have been unstoppable.
Mm-hmm.
Unstoppable.
Smashing him over everyone's head.
Yep. So, we had to nerf him somehow.
It's true. Cornucopia of sub stories, obviously. Like you're gonna go through a lot of those just throughout
Some
the
of
game.
them are really good.
They're very wacky and weird. They're very much in the tradition of the series. So like even though it's a very different time period, they're still able to kind of create that charm of just the weirdness and the wackiness of these subplots that you get in all of the games, which is really good. There's a bunch of mini games you can do. Like we said, there's karaoke, there's all the
Fishing.
gambling stuff, there's fishing. There's the farm aspect that you can do with Haruka,
Yeah.
where you make a farm and you
Cook.
build up this farm. You there's the cooking mini game. You can hang out with some cats and dogs. They replaced
Chickens.
and chickens, yes, the completion point system with a virtue system, which is basically just the same thing. You acquire virtue and then you spend that to unlock new abilities or new things for like the farm and all that sort of stuff. It's very easy to do, very simple, and you can unlock all that stuff pretty easily throughout the game. I think like nothing really felt like it was really like super duper locked behind anything,
Mm-hmm.
which is very nice and everything. Let's see here. There's the battle dungeon stuff, which is where you get the trooper cards and all that sort of stuff. You just kind of go through these little mini dungeons, and that's where you can get a lot of like the more rare crafting materials, which is also crafting in this game we should mention, where you can craft like weapons and equipment for Ryoma. But the dungeons is where you get a lot of the more rare items there. You can also pick up like weapons and everything, and also get more trooper cards as you go through each and every dungeon and all that sort of stuff. What else is there? There's the arena. Arena is obviously a staple of the series, so that's there. There's
Did we even do the arena?
I did on my off time.
Oh, okay. I didn't even remember the arena.
It's the arena.
All right, that makes sense.
There's the dude who shoots cannonballs at you like it's like you're playing
It's
baseball.
baseball.
And I thought that was very funny, and also he has like a skeet shooting section.
Yep.
That was very humorous indeed. But yeah, it's like, I mean, it's a Yakuza game. It plays like one of those, even though it plays like an older version of those. It's got all the stuff you would want from one of those kinds of games in it.
Mm-hmm.
There's also things where you can like bond with people. You can make little friendships, and there's little tinier stories that are in there where you just kind of like you help out a person and you become friends with them, and you get a little bit of story for that character and everything, and they'll give you items as you bond up and everything. It's a good
We
way
became
to
really
kind of
good
farm
friends.
virtue and everything.
We became really good friends with a fisherman who didn't know how to fish.
Yeah, we gave him like 2 sharks.
We gave him 2 sharks and a tiny baby fish.
Same thing we did with a cat. We gave it a shark.
And we gave it a shark, and then we named it Tuna.
Yep. Because we wanted to tune it at the end.
We gave him a tuna. And then tuna.
That is true. I will say, combat-wise, it is very funny to use the gun style because you can just like walk backwards and then just fire upon everyone and just watch them die.
Yep.
It's
It
very
was great
easy.
to watch.
Very easy to
it
do
is a
that.
shame there's no lock on though with a gun.
Yeah, especially just in the combat in general, that there's no lock on. I think that would have helped a lot in some certain circumstances, especially when the camera gets a little funky. That would have really been a good thing to have there and use, but I was still able to get through a lot of the combat even without having a lock on or anything like that. So I think that was okay. It's just it could have been better in that aspect.
Right.
For sure. But yeah, it's a Yakuza game.
Mhm.
It is one of these types of games. It's just in a different time period, and there's a lot of stuff that you kind of have to digest, especially when you're going into this game, because this is a very real part of Japanese history that you're going into. I mean, obviously it's a historical fictionized version of it, but
Right.
a lot of the characters you are meeting are real people. The setting is a real place. The story is a real thing that happened
Mm-hmm.
for the most part. So there's a lot that you have to kind of like understand, and they have to explain a lot, especially early on.
Mm-hmm.
Which means, you have to go into this as well, understanding that this is going to be a game with a very slow start.
Yep.
And, it's not going to be like any of the other Yakuza games where you kind of like kick things off and you're going, especially like the sequel games. I mean, obviously like 7 as a slow start and everything, and some of the other ones do as well. But this one especially feels like it has a slow start just because they have to super explain who each character is, the setting, the time period, the story, everything that's going on around the country as well. Like why this is such a tense period in Japanese history. Like there's so much you have to really let the player understand that you have to have this very slow and methodical start, or else if you just like threw them in all willy-nilly, everyone would just be, or at least people outside of Japan would be very confused about what's happening, or like have no idea what's going on and who these people are, and it would just be a mess.
Even something as basic as like in the very beginning, they established a class system.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't feel like, oh, hey, this is a big deal, but like it actually is a very significant part of the story itself, and it's a good introduction to Ryoma as well, but like that has to happen, and it's not like a bombastic, fun Yakuza moment. It's like, yeah, he protects a lady and her kid from getting beat up by these guys who are like, oh no, you're the scum of the earth, kid. I don't think they actually said that.
I mean, basically.
They basically said that.
But yeah, I think that's enough generalized stuff. We can dive into the story. Obviously, we can't go into the entirety of the story because we would be here for an hour literally trying to explain the time period and the history of what's going on.
Right.
And all of the specific things that you have to know and all of that sort of stuff. So I think we'll just hit some of the beats that we really liked and kind of give like a very brief overview of like the generalized part of the story of like, like who Ryoma Sakamoto is and what's his agenda
Motivation.
in this game. Yeah, his motivations and everything. So let's dive into all of that. So yeah, you play as Sakamoto Ryoma. The guy from Live Alive. He's back in another video game.
He is.
Obviously, he's based off the real person who existed and everything. He's,
Yep.
all of that. So, the beginning of this game, you see your mentor get murdered and you're there with your brother.
Your
So
brother.
you have to flee your home country of Tosa, or your homeland of Tosa, I should say. And you flee. There you go. That's the word. To Kyo, which is the modern day Kyoto. And you stay there for basically a year until the game picks back up, and you're basically trying to investigate who this person who murdered your mentor is and everything, and why they did it. And that leads you into a whole bunch of stuff that happens as the game goes on. You become a member of the Shinsengumi, who is basically a like specialized police force in Kyo. That's where you meet a bunch of familiar faces, let's say.
Yep, that's one way to put it.
Mm-hmm. And then a whole bunch of stuff goes down.
That's also a way to put it.
Yep.
um That's funny.
It's the way to do it, obviously.
No, I mean, you're not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Ryoma becomes Saito Hajime.
Yes, that's his assumed name he takes while in Kyo, because he's like, hey, I don't want people to know who I am, because this name that I had obviously is going to be tied to the fact that I deserted Tosa, so people are going to be looking for me, so I need to find a new name.
I also didn't realize until this game that Kyoto and Tokyo are just swapped names.
The more you know.
Yeah, I had no idea. I was like, wait a minute.
The more you know. Like we said, it's very much a slow start. I feel like it's not until like the 5th or 6th chapter where you start feeling like, okay, now we're getting to some Yakuza.
I mean, you do have the like, I don't remember what chapter it is, but you have the bathhouse scene, which is pretty Yakuza.
You mean you're not wrong?
Because you're in there with the bath keeper, and you end up getting into a naked fist fight where you have the most unflinching fog cloud around your crotch. It's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
Pretty good.
Oh man, that fight's really dumb.
It's really dumb. I liked it a lot.
It's really dumb and good. But yeah, like I mean, we were looking through this Wikipedia, and then it was just like, oh right, this is a real person. 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 And like, you know, obviously, like knowledge of who Ryoma Sakamoto is more high than I think some of these other folks are.
Yeah.
But I kind of went into this thinking like, I know like obviously this is a real period in Japanese history and everything, but I didn't think that they would use all of these different historical figures in this game. Like,
no,
I
didn't
and,
either.
Like, swap names or do stuff like that, but try and keep the kind of the same setting and everything. But like a lot of the people you meet here are real people who existed in history.
Yeah, and like actually were involved with these events, and that's the thing that I did not expect, is that like I didn't expect these to be, or there to be as many real people as we had, including the fact that Saito Hajime is a real person.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what? You're real too? Like, I just thought it was like a name he took. But no, that's a real person too. But like a lot of the major players that we hang out with in this game are real people. I mean, like they were based on real people.
Yeah.
And like some major events get reframed for this game, but like generally end up going down like the final result of the events is the same, even if the way that we get there is not necessarily
true to life,
like the drinking with the dog.
So good.
There was one of my favorite scenes.
We'll get to that in a little, but there's a scene at the end of the game where you and the lads are trying to find the other Ryoma Sakamoto who's been using your name and everything, and going around murdering your comrades and stuff like that. And I forget, I think maybe Date's character comes in and says like, hey, here's I'm gonna go to Ryuji's character, who is Saigo,
Mm-hmm.
and chit chat about him, gonna get him to this meeting that we need to do and everything. I'm gonna show him this picture, and he pulls out this picture, and it's this picture of the other Ryoma Sakamoto, and you were like,
Yes.
"Oh my god, that's an actual, like, that's a real thing. That's an
I
actual
freaked
picture."
out.
And you showed me like the actual picture. It's the same thing. It's just obviously the model is based off of the character in the game, but like it's the same pose, it's the same like everything,
Background,
same
everything's
background.
the same.
Yeah, which is a very cool touch that they were able to like use that kind of detail in this and make it work.
Right, right. I was so impressed. Like, I mean, you can attest to this. I freaked out when I saw that picture because it was just like, oh my God, I had been on the Wikipedia page for Ryoma Sakamoto like recently, just reading about who he was and what he did. And I remember that picture. I was like, holy crap, it's
Mm-hmm.
the same picture. And I sent it to you. You're like, yeah, that is the same picture. But like that's such a nice touch.
Yeah.
And it's a minor touch, but it shows like, hey, you know, we know what we're doing.
Yeah, and like there's a ton of stuff in this game that like is, true to life. Like the Tenenrishin style was a real thing. The
Mm-hmm.
Shinsengumi was a real thing. Like obviously, like all the people you meet in the Shinsengumi were real people who obviously were in that group. The raid on the Ikadaya Inn was a real event that happened. That plays out very similarly to how it went in real life, or in the game, essentially. Like it's the Shinsengumi against the loyalist Shishi.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like it's wild to think that they're able to use all of these very specific points in Japanese history, change them a little bit, obviously, to fit the story of the game they're trying to tell, but make it all work in the end, so where like you actually feel like you're kind of in this very chaotic moment in Japanese history.
Right, right. Well, and I mentioned it before we started recording. Katsura Kogoro, who was Akiyama in this game,
Mm-hmm.
at the very end of the game, you see him in like a Western style suit.
And we were both kind of like, is that period
Like,
appropriate? Like,
like would he
obviously,
be doing that?
yeah.
That's weird.
I mean, obviously, it feels like it probably would be, because I don't think they would make such a weird mistake in detail in that regard. But it felt such like a weird departure from everything else we had seen. So it was just like
Hmm.
one of those things, you're like, huh, wait a minute.
But then I went to his Wikipedia page, and the same suit
Mm-hmm.
is like the main picture that he has. Like that, it's the exact same suit. And like they really put a lot of detail and like actual research into doing this, which is really cool.
Which they easily could have not done,
Oh yeah.
because like we said, this is just a stopgap. Originally, this was a stopgap game between 5 and 0.
Hmm.
So like they just wanted to put something out on the PS4, and this is what they did. So like they could have easily just been like, hey, let's go into this time period, but just make our own thing and do
Right.
whatever we want. But they really tried to stick to detail and everything, and make all of these events work within this story that they're also trying to tell, which is similar to what things that happen, but also, it's a Yakuza story at the end of the day, so it's got to have its twists and turns and all that sort of stuff. But I think they really did a good job of just like using this time period to fit the story they tell, and also make it all like just work in a very real and interesting way.
Hmm.
And especially it's nice because like for people like us who aren't going to be familiar with this time period and like this story and everything, it makes it very engaging. Like obviously there's a lot of like dramatized stuff, because it's not
Right.
true to life in the strictest sense. But we're able to learn about this specific time period in history, like why it was very important for this country and everything, and get all those understandings in a way that like we might not have been able to if they had done something different.
Right.
Because I mean, like, there's a lot of interesting conversations you have with people about like, you know, Western forces coming to Japan and everything, the threat of colonialization,
Yep.
and like all of those kinds of conversations that were happening in the 19th century. I mean, you get those here, and how people are going to react to them and how they feel about that sort of stuff. It's very interesting.
It is, and I mean, you still have them talking about like the arrival of the black ships and
Hmm.
like what that means. I assume that we probably didn't actually have any. I wonder. I wonder when I just had a realization. I was gonna say I doubt we had situations like our pal Tom, who was the American flag samurai.
Shouts out Tom.
But I'm wondering if they named him after Tom Cruise because of The Last Samurai.
It's probably likely.
I mean, it just seems like I realized it when I said that. I was like, wait a minute, Tom. That's a very specific name
Hmm.
for somebody who wants to be a samurai. Anyway, he is wearing like rah rah American flag, which is
It's
really
very
funny.
funny.
But then like you said earlier, like there was a British I guess he was a diplomat of some sort.
Yes.
And like he was a real guy. He was there. Wild. Um, you do have some interesting conversations
Oh,
in
go
this.
go look at a picture of Tom Cruise in The Last Samurai. That's definitely what they're going for.
So I was right.
Yeah. Like that hair is it's not necessarily as like bright blonde as it is in the game, but it's basically the same
Oh,
hairstyle.
it's the same
Yeah.
hairstyle. That's
Yeah.
absolutely what they were going for. Okay. Yep.
USA.
Yeah, USA.
USA.
Uh, good call on actually looking that up and taking it further than what I had actually done. Um, there are some conversations that are kind of yikes given like where Japanese history goes very soon after this.
Hmm.
Um, but like I can forgive it because it would have contextually made sense for these kinds of conversations to be had. Um, but yeah, oof. I didn't expect to go into this and have like conversations with video game characters about colonialism.
Right, right.
The negatives and positives of, if you could even call it a positive, of colonialism and oofa doofa. And you even have like the like guys in here who are like very much anti anything Western,
Hmm.
which I'm sure existed.
Sure. There's probably definitely people who are just like, hey, these people are trying to invade our country. We like
Right,
who
wrong.
knows if any of these people who are coming in are going to like try and do the same thing. Like we can't trust them type of deal.
Right. There was that one guy who was like aggressively white.
Oh my god, yeah.
Do you remember him?
The mustache man.
The mustache man, like he was aggressively white. Really. I mean, like the character himself, like when he was talking and stuff wasn't aggressively white. His just character model was aggressively white.
Hmm.
It was really funny. Yeah, I mean, like as somebody who's a giant history nerd, that's kind of an understatement. Um, I was really impressed with the amount of detail that they put in there and like actually paying a lot of attention to what like the historical situation was and trying to work some of that in there. Like that was really impressive. Good job.
Good job.
Yay.
So yeah, like I think that's all very poignant and everything. I was gonna say something. Now I'm just completely blanking on it.
Do, did you want to talk about more of the like history story, or do you want to talk more about like the goofy yakuza-ness of it,
I think
or
let's talk about some goofy
wherever?
yakuza-ness of this. Let's talk about a very specific chapter.
Yes, yes.
I think it's like chapter 9
It was either chapter 8 or chapter 9. I don't remember which one it was.
Trying to find here.
Nahone.
Let's see if things will work here.
Yay, working.
It's chapter 9.
Chapter 9, okay.
Chapter 9. So the crux of this chapter is that at the end of the last chapter, you learned that your sworn brother Takechi Hanpeta had been captured by the Tosa and was forced to commit seppuku, which is a real thing that happened to him. Like, that's actually how he dies in real life. So Ryoma Sakamoto is very upset by this. He's just spending the days drinking in his hotel or his inn. Just doesn't want to deal with anything. He just wants to go get drunk. So that's what you do in the game. To drink. You leave, you go out and start drinking, and this lady runs up to you in one of the little bars you're at and is like, "Hey, come have a drink with me. We'll have a little chit chat. It'll be a lot nicer than how it is where you're at right now." So you go to this little bar that's a ways away, you drink there, and then Akiyama's dude shows up. I forget his name, Katsura. He shows up and he wants to have a little chit chat with you because the last time you had seen him was during the Igadaya incident where you let him go.
Yes.
So he's like, I want to thank you for that. Now, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And he, gives his, sympathies for Takeshi dying and everything. Tries to talk to Ryoma about it, and Ryoma's just like, I don't want to deal with this. I just want to drink.
I just want to drink. Give me all the sake.
Yeah. So eventually he leaves. Ryoma leaves, and he goes outside, and they run into Saigo, who is Ryuji's counterpart. And Katsura and Saigo are of different factions? And these two factions are very much rivals or enemies with each other. Like, they don't like each other. You see each other in the street, you're probably going to fight. So these two, like, they see each other in the street, and they just want to fight. They just want to throw down right here and now. But before that, to set the scene of why Saigo shows up, we get the recreation of the dog scene from Yakuza 1.
Yep.
Where there's just these guys throwing rocks at a dog, and Ryoma and Katsura are like, man, these guys suck. We should probably stop that. And just as they're about to, there's a rock being thrown at the dog, and you see a hand come in and grab it, and it's Saigo, and you're like, oh, cool, let's go.
You were like, he stole our scene.
And he beats up these dudes, and he takes the dog, and he's like, oh, you're a fighter. And the dog bites him, and the other two are just like, uh-oh. He's like, oh, you're showing your fangs. You got the spunk. I like it.
I like your spunk, kid.
You're a new member of the Satsuma domain. Very good.
It's so good. I love how they were initially like, oh man, it's interesting to see the softer side of him, and then the dog bites him, and they're like, uh-oh. He's just like, yeah, you little scamp.
So yeah, that happens, and then Katsura and Saigo want to fight each other. And Ryoma's just drunk. Very drunk. So he stops them two from fighting, grabs their swords, and just flings them. He's like, well, if you guys want to fight, I want to fight too.
But with our fists.
With our fists. So you fight both of them, and you beat them up. And then afterwards, you're just like, all right, boys, we're going drinking. And you just go to like a couple of bars, you tear the place down, you drink those two under the table, and you're still like, I want to keep getting drunk.
You literally drink all the sake at one bar at one point.
And then you leave, and you're like, oh, one of them's like, oh, all right, we'll cover it for you, don't worry. And Ryoma's like, oh, thanks. Anyways, let's go. We're gonna go keep drinking. Let's go.
Katsura ends up paying for it all.
Yeah.
Yep. He's like, yeah, let's just keep going.
And then you go to, I think, a bar in like Gion or something, and like you just sitting there still drinking, and you kind of just like chit chat about things. And Ryoma's basically like has this like monologue about just like, why you guys gotta fight each other? It's real dumb. Like, you both are cool dudes. Like, you guys could get along. It's fine. And then those two are just like, what the heck's this guy talking about? Like, what do you mean? They're kind of just like, I mean, maybe he has a point, I guess. I don't know. And then like they both look over and Ryoma's just like honk shoeing. He's passed out.
Yep.
And they're like, oh god. So like those two have to like take you back to the inn and everything, and it's so good. Like that whole scene is just amazing. Like I literally we played through that entire scene, um, and I think my initial reaction to the end of that whole section of events was just like that is one of the best Yakuza scenes I have ever seen in this entire series.
Yes,
That is a
yes.
top tier scene in the entire series of this game of these games. Just man,
And then you find out that like those dudes had to like carry him back to the
yeah.
hotel.
And then like after that, you learn like, oh, by the way, those two formed an alliance together, and like some weird. It seems like somebody put them together and everything. And Rion was like, oh, I don't know anything about that. Oh,
Nope.
it's real strange.
Wow.
Oh,
How could
interesting.
that have happened?
Huh.
Man, I was I was out drinking. I don't know anything about anything.
I was blacked out. Also,
Anyway,
one of the other good things about that is that while you're out drinking, the dog is with you the entire time.
the entire time the dog just walks with you.
And anytime they're drinking, the dog's just like, I'm gonna take a nap.
It's so good.
You never see the dog again, which is very disappointing. But I
It
love
is
the fact
disappointing.
that Saigo just adopts this dog and is like, all right,
Yep.
you're coming with me. You're part of the army now.
You're
Um,
part of the crew, kid. Let's go.
which I think as well is this brings up another interesting topic of this is that with this game using all of these different characters from the entire series and everything, like it's obviously a big fan service game in that respect because like you're seeing all these characters in different avenues and everything, but they also let these characters have different motivations and have different alignments essentially compared to their
Hmm.
original counterparts. Like Ryuji's a good guy in this game. Like he's just your
Yeah.
pal and everything. Like obviously he's this tough guy that you fight and everything, but like he's just a dude who hangs out with you, He's
Fight
just
you naked.
fight you naked, but it's also your drinking buddy, which is cool because we were talking about this when the dog scene showed up. It was like it's neat that we get to see him in like a good guy light compared to like how he is in 2 where he's obviously
Right.
the main antagonist and everything, but like he's such a good character that is neat to see this different side of him. And also like
Hmm.
when you join up with the Shinsengumi, like, the deputy chief is Hijikata, who is based off of Mifune from Yakuza 3, who is the main antagonist of that game. So
Yep.
the whole time I think both of us were like, all right, when's this guy going to turn on us? When do we have to fight him? And when's he going to become a bad guy? Turns out he's a bro.
He's a bro.
He's with you the whole time. Well, I mean, not the whole time. Like, obviously, he's kind of suspicious of you for a lot of it, but like, by the end of it, he's a part of your crew.
He's ride or die.
Which I was just like, wow, I was not expecting this in the slightest.
I wasn't either. It's amazing how you get like these different things. Although I do think it was funny that when he was beating up the guy, not this guy, but Ryuji, when he was beating up the guys about the dog, you're like, all right, now steal their pants. I was like, yeah.
Good callback.
It was a good callback. But yeah, like you get to see characters doing things that you wouldn't normally see them do. And like you said, have different kinds of alignments. Like everybody's still morally pretty gray. Which is
Or
to be
also kind of
expected.
follow like what their original character is like.
Yeah, yeah. Like there are still moments where Akiyama like has some like financial support moments. I was like, oh, that tracks. That makes sense. He would do that because that's what Akiyama did.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he
Um,
has Hana with him, so.
he has Hana with him, which interesting that they are, together.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was hinted at in the actual Yakuza series, but in this one it's blatant. He even
But also because like that's an actual thing that happened in history.
correct,
Is that they
correct,
were blatant
correct.
as well. So.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I just he said at one point like my woman. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But then we went and did karaoke with her.
Oh
So
man, those late game karaoke segments that you get with the other characters are super good.
I couldn't breathe for a moment when we were doing Majima's.
Oh my god,
It was
real
wild.
good.
And then we're like, hey, do you want us to sing the Sakura song again?
5 times in a row. Like, yep, all right.
Yep. Gonna go take our girl out for a date. Hey, let's sing the song for her and
Mm-hmm.
dance. Yay. Hilarious.
Yeah, that's all real good stuff.
But it
Um,
was a lot of fun to see these characters in different
yeah.
contexts.
I
Like,
mean, there's also a lot of characters that you kind of expect to be bad dudes, like a lot of the underlings of the Shinsengumi that kind of die off very quickly are also just like
mm,
these were dudes that were bad guys in the other games for the most part, so
yeah.
you kind of understand. I think the one that's kind of the most interesting um is like I'm trying to remember his name now. Kashiwagi's character, because he's the guy that eventually you find out is the man who murdered your mentor and everything.
Yes.
But also he also looks after you at points. So it's very Kashiwagi-esque, but at the end he's kind of also like he did some bad things. Uh-oh.
Yep. Yep. And I called it that it was gonna be him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like there's one part where like somebody's gonna out you for like who you are and what you do, and he's like, he was talking too much. He had to die. And somebody even mentions like, it's not usually his style to like hit somebody from the back, but he must have had a reason. So like that was interesting. And even shoot, what's his name? Um, was it Kondo? The like main leader guy.
Yes.
Um, like he even had some like interesting dynamics to him that I wasn't expecting.
Mm-hmm. Which I think they did a good job in this by recasting some characters. And it's like we talked about earlier, like they recast some characters to make them more uh familiar to people who had played like 0, 6, and 7.
Hmm.
But in particular, like Takeshi Hanpeda didn't have like a original counterpart the first time through.
Hmm.
So they made him one of the 3-0 baddies.
Hmm.
Oreo didn't have one. She's now Yuki from the Cabaret Club minigames in 0 and 2.
Hmm.
Kondo didn't have anyone, who's now just Adachi.
Right, which was we was like, what?
But like I think though making those characters like counterparts in this version just made their stories I think more interesting, and I think they were able to get probably I like obviously I haven't seen the original performances, but I really like their performances in this game in particular.
Um, One thing that in terms of performances that I think is really wild is that Jungi Han's character is in this.
Yes.
And I kept saying like this is more the Yakuza 6 Jungi Han than Yakuza 7.
So
But
before that dude, he
that's
was
what I was gonna say.
the dude from 5, like the guy in jail,
Yeah, with the giant scar and stuff.
also a messed up dude.
A very messed up dude, but it was such a wild thing to look at it. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's who this was originally?
Right.
Um, but they were still able to make it so that like that character was legitimately terrifying at moments.
Hmm.
And I mean, I might have more of a like emotional connection with both Jungi Hans because I think that character is really interesting.
Right.
Um, but they took like essentially what is a pretty boy and they're like, all right, well, this character was horrifying physically in the previous game. We're gonna make this pretty boy and still make him absolutely fed up.
Hmm.
I was like, whoa, interesting. Um, and I think that is it Hiske? Is that
Yeah.
his name? I think that his switch was also really good.
Hmm.
Because he had some of the same kind of moments of like, oh, I'm a goofy dude. You never know what to expect from me. But then like, oh, I'm just gonna brutally cut down this dude with like no remorse whatsoever.
There's a
Like,
couple of
oh,
times where like he plays that goofy voice up and then immediately switches to like the serious tone as well, which is very
yep,
well done.
it's very well done. It
Hmm.
was unsettling at points,
Yeah.
honestly. You pointed out that that one scene that he did that was the like ill-fated couple from 3 through 5.
Yeah, which was very wild. Like, there's obviously a lot of people that are in this game from previous games, but like those two showing up was just like that's a deep cut.
That's a
Because like
deep cut.
if you skip like all the sub stories, you would never know who those two are.
No, never ever.
But I thought that was
P-
a funny way to put them in there.
Yeah, then it was sad.
Yeah. It's a bad time.
And a not great time. Um, but yeah, I mean, I just thought that was really, really well done. Like, I think that the switches that they made were a good thing,
Yeah.
in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like I said, I haven't seen the original ones, but I feel like the way that they switched it, like it felt natural and it felt like it fit.
Right. Let's talk about the end of this game. Because
Okay,
there's a couple things I think in the end of this game that I was kind of surprised by. Like, you never fight that dude who's the admiral of the navy,
right.
who shows up every now and then. He's the one who brings the fake Sakamoto Ryoma to Saigo and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of see him just like skittering about in the background, trying to maneuver around and do all this sort of stuff. But like, I thought he was going to be someone you would fight later on, and you just don't. He just kind
You
of
just don't.
disappears.
Yeah, I mean, you even mentioned at the end, like, oh, I bet he's the final boss.
No, we have the final boss fight, and then another guy shows up, and you just don't even fight him. You just beat him up
Yep.
verbally and physically.
Verbally. I mean, you're not wrong.
So I thought that was kind of surprising. I think Takechi living at the end was surprising, considering like he takes a bullet for us, and then
Yep.
you see him later on. It's like, oh, you survived. Interesting.
And I
'Cause-
had mentioned to you that I didn't feel like there was any redeeming him.
yeah,
So I was surprised that he lived.
and also it's Yakuza villains who have a lot of times Yakuza villains just don't make it out of the game.
Yeah, they don't have a good time, really.
Yeah. Ryoma living was interesting because he gets shot 3 times, but he's fine.
Yeah, he just bled a lot. It's wild because I assume it's like adrenaline, entirely adrenaline. Because when he first gets shot like the 3 times, he's like struggling to even stand up,
Mm-hmm.
and
But
then
then
by
the
the end,
boys
he's just
show up.
the boys show up, and then he's like, "All right, I'm good. I can stand up, and I'm going to destroy you verbally and
Oh man.
physically."
So the guy who shows up is Yamauchi Yoda, who is the dude who leads the Tosa domain.
Mm-hmm.
He basically reveals his plan that he's like, oh, I'm going to sell Japan to the British
Mm-hmm.
and everything, make a lot of money. I'll get a nice, cozy leadership position. And they're like, we don't want colonialization. That seems bad. He's like, no, I'm smart. Blah 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 blah. And like once
Are you gonna mention the moment that I want you to mention? I hope you're gonna mention it.
I hope so. But like so once like the lads show up and everything and they surround him, he starts like pleading for his life and he's like, "Oh no, don't do anything. Ryoma, you've got to help me, Ryoma." And Ryoma just looks at him and just like, "You keep saying this name Ryoma. I don't know who that is."
Mm-hmm. That's what I wanted you to bring up. Yes, that was
And
such a
then
good
and
moment.
then Yamauchi's just like, "Oh no." Oh man, that part was so good. Like there's parts at the end of this game where like Ryoma starts figuring out like who he truly wants to be and everything, where he just starts getting vicious to people who deserve
Yep.
it.
Yep.
Like there's that scene, there's the scene where you fight the big boy, that I forget his name, but he's the dude, he's like one of the villains from 5, and you fight him during the fire of Kyo, and essentially like you beat him and then you're just like very dismissive of him. There's something really cool he says, but I forget exactly what he says. Oh, he's like, this is the story of Sakamoto Ryoma. You're not a part of this story.
Yeah.
And just walks away from him and then just lets like that building fall on him.
Yep. Because he's like, oh no, my legs aren't working. Please help me. Please help me. And he's just like,
Nah, dog.
no, I ain't about that life.
I was just like, oh man.
It was
so
so cool. So cool. Like once he got to the point where he was done, he was done.
Mm-hmm.
It was good. But yeah, that moment at the end where he was like, who are you talking about? I was like, yes.
So good.
Because like they had mentioned a few times, like Ryoma Sakamoto died at that hotel that night.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were saying like both of their identities at that hotel were dead.
Yeah.
And so he accepts that is not me anymore. That will never be me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's like so cool.
Which is interesting that like a lot of this story is just about identity.
Yeah.
And figuring out who exactly you are, because like there's so many characters in this game who have multiple identities, let's say.
Yep.
And them trying to figure out exactly like who their true self is and everything. And a lot of the story revolves around, Ryoma Sakamoto and his dual identity of that and Saito Hajime. So like, him trying to figure out exactly who he is, especially near the end when everything's kind of going down and everything. I thought it was very interesting that a lot of the story is also kind of just based around that idea, because it's not exactly something you would expect from this kind of game. Is that like that's a core component of the story and a core component that you take away from the story.
Isn't it Majima's character who's basically like, yeah, Saito Hajime is real too. That's you.
Yes.
Isn't it his character?
Yeah, because like right before you're leaving to go to Tosa, like you have this conversation with Majima's character, and like you're basically just like, yeah, there's nothing from here. Like this life I led for the last year wasn't real or anything. And he's like, no, dude, you lived here. Everything you did here is real. All the relationships you made were real. The impact you made in this city was real. Like this last year was real. You are this person, regardless of what the name is or not. Like all those experiences make you who you are, essentially. And it was like this very like endearing like talk he gives to him.
Yeah, it was really good.
Mm-hmm.
And then he did like some wingman-y stuff, which is funny.
He did. It was very good.
But yeah, you also find out that like a good portion of the Shizungumi guys are like, that's not who they actually were to begin with.
Yeah.
They have different identities. Okay.
Like those guys do, Ryoma does, Takeshi does, Katsura obviously does because he gives you an alias at first as well.
Yep.
There's a lot of characters in this game that are just like, I'm this person, but I'm also this person. Who am
I? And something that you brought up when we got the reveal about the division captains and their actual identities is that there's like this throwaway line early on about like Okita being like a pretty boy. And we're like, Majima?
There's a couple of like Ryoma brings it up at one point. He's like, I don't really see it. And then like someone else you talk to brings it up and is like, I don't really see it. So it's very interesting to like two people bring that up and you're just kind of like, that's strange.
Yeah.
And then you meet the real people who are, behind those identities and it's like, oh, that's why.
And then they even made a joke of like, oh, he pulled the short end of the stick here and he had to be the pretty one. It's like, oh my God. Which I mean, like, I guess if you're going out of the three of them, like he's probably the prettiest.
Sure. Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
But even then, it was a good goof.
Yeah.
But like it came out of like what seemed like some throwaway lines and absolutely were not throwaway lines at all.
No.
Like I thought they were just dunking on his appearance. And I mean they were dunking on his appearance, but it had a reason.
Yeah.
Really good.
It's really good. I thought the post-credit stuff was fine. We get the scene with Katsura and Takeshi where we learn that Takeshi is now like retired, but he assumed the identity of Yamauchi Yoda to try and tide things over as this, we're in this period of change in Japan.
Yep.
We see Date's character writing the book for about Ryoma Sakamoto, which I believe that character or that dude in real life did.
That makes sense. And it was cool because he's like, I'm having to put two guys together into one.
Like, or maybe I'm thinking of the British dude. Because I think
no,
this dude died with Ryoma Sakamoto in the inn.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Date's character did?
Yes. I think
oh man. Then I'm glad that he didn't actually die from that wound that he got in the end then.
So that's why he's wounded in that scene.
That makes a lot of sense. Nahone.
And
then he pulls a me with it's like
because
dark in there.
The innkeeper comes in. It's just like, open up the windows. You need some light. He's like, son, no.
No.
And then there's a scene where Ryoma and Oreo are just traveling around, looking at a nice scenery,
Mm-hmm.
but they can't get married.
They can't get married. That is something that the innkeeper
But
brings
they
up.
they did in real life apparently. So,
Yeah, that makes sense.
but yeah,
But
I
they're
would like
just
to see what
enjoying it.
happened with like the boys.
Yeah, I would have liked that too.
But I think overall it kind of wraps a bow on everything. Like obviously you can't really make a sequel out of this. I don't think because like
Nope.
then you're going off in a completely different direction from history.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but like I really, man, this is a really good game.
It's a really good game. I did not expect to like this game as much as I did.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, seems to be the case for basically literally every Yakuza game that I've encountered. That I'm like, wow, why are you so good? You have no right to be this good.
It's true.
But like this one was really, really unexpected for me. Like I didn't expect for it to be as well done and as like as honestly like pretty expertly woven together as it was.
Yeah, because like when you go into this, there's so many unknown factors to this because like it's a completely different setting. It's all these different characters that are based off of characters you know and everything like so like that could be very hard to really make a good game out of that without just being super pandering.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're able to weave through all of like, you know, the history that they have to use, the story that they want to tell, the fan service that they want to implement into the game and combine all that stuff together into just a really well-made package. And I really got to commend the localization team especially for this as well because they did a really good job of explaining things when it needed to be explained, using the right terminology here and there. So, like, obviously, if you don't know Japanese, it's going to make that a little bit more confusing, but I think you kind of have to use that terminology because of just this time period and what's happening and everything. And they do a really good job of that and just making the story just flow really well and also just having really good humor scattered throughout it as well.
Mm-hmm.
They do a really good job, especially in this game, which would have to, I'm sure it was a very difficult undertaking to say the least
I'm
to
sure
make
it was a
this
tough
all
localization.
to make this all work, but I think
Yeah.
they did a really good job.
Good job, guys. People, humans, localization team. That's what I'm looking for.
They are
Good
indeed
job.
humans.
Humans. They did a really, really great job. And
Yeah.
I'm super thankful for them because I'm glad that we got to play this game.
Mm-hmm.
The only bad thing is that there are great white sharks in it.
Very spooky.
They shouldn't allow that.
It does also seem like they're. I talked to you about this at one point, but like it does seem there's some interesting accessibility options in this game, in particular, to make a lot of the combat easier for people who don't play these kinds of games, especially because like
like me.
The last mainline game was a JRPG, so
right.
If you're taking those people who just got into the series and like, oh hey, maybe I want to play this, like it gives them a way to play this game without being super bogged down with all of the fighting mechanics that are in this game.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a really good idea, especially for this game. But yeah, this is a good game.
It's a very good game.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was petting a cat and I shouldn't do that when we're recording.
Hey, that's fine. Cats deserve to be pet.
Especially when they got half their teeth taken out of their head.
Poor buddy. He's only got 3 teeth now. So yeah, that's Like a Dragon Ishin, and we'll reconvene with the Like a Dragon series, I guess later this year when Like a Dragon Gaiden: The Man Who Erased His Name comes out. See
That'll
what's
be
up
fun.
with Mr. Kiryu.
The actual Kiryu,
Actual Kiryu.
Not this version.
It does say here apparently this game's going to be about the same length in terms of story as the Kaito Files was, but it's also going to have like actual like sub stories and mini games and stuff like that. So
yay! Love side stories and mini games.
I think there's going to be a VTuber hostess in this game.
Interesting.
Because do you remember Coco, who graduated from Hololive?
I do remember Coco.
She's now Kason, which is like her actual identity that she used on the side as well during that time. She auditioned for this game as a hostess, and she's like in like the final rounds of like the auditions. So I think she's
Really?
potentially going to be in the game, if not like. I think the last things they're doing is like figuring out like who's going to be like mainline featured.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think she's potentially going to be in this game.
I mean, that would be super cool for her because she loves the series.
Yeah,
That'd be rad.
yeah. But I'm
Good for
excited
her.
to see this game when it comes out because I want to see that Kiryu story from post 6. What he was
Mm-hmm.
doing in 7 and right before we get to 8.
How does he become Unarakami?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I forgot about that. Oh man. But yeah, that's going to do it for this week's episode.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
That was indeed a lot of fun. So if you'd like more from us, head on over to seasonalanimecheckup.com or sac.cool, where you can find past episodes of this podcast and other podcasts like Jared and I Watch. You can also find columns and reviews on the site as well. If you'd like more from Anladium, go to anladium.com. She's got columns and reviews. You can follow us on Twitter and TikTok at Anime Checkup. You can buy our books, One Shiny Moment, A Critical Analysis of Love, Life, Sunshine, and Hot Tubs and Pac-Man on Amazon.com. And you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/SACOVA. Buy us a slice of pizza, get access to unedited versions of the podcast early, and a whole wealth of bonus content as well.
Mm-hmm.
Next week, we'll got something else for you. Who knows what it'll be, but we'll know in a week.